If the Sun and Venus have the wrong relationship, it could turn nasty. My name is Archie Dunlop. This is Talking Astrology with Archie, and it is Thursday, July the 30th, 2026. Right now, the Sun and Venus are 45 degrees apart, and they stay 45 degrees apart for quite some time. I think sort of into early September. And so I'm not just talking about a one-day wonder. I am talking about something ongoing. And so this is going to be a theme of this video. And as far as this video is concerned, I will start by looking at the overall picture, what's going on today, and then I will be looking at this Sun-Venus semisquare, and it also relates to the fact that Venus is starting to slow down. In early October, in fact, Venus turns retrograde, and having looked at the Sun and Venus, I will move on to the 12 signs, and I will finish with an I Ching reading. So to begin with, let's look at the broad astrological picture today. So here is a chart for today, Thursday, July the 30th, 2026, set for New York. And the moon is still in Aquarius. So the moon was in Aquarius yesterday. Yesterday we, of course, had a full moon. And this full moon, you could say, is still in existence because, the sun is still in Leo. The moon is still in Aquarius. So there is very much a full moon energy here. But, of course, the moon is now waning. And this full moon, the immediate power of this full moon is starting to lessen. And so, yesterday, Wednesday, things might have been intense as we were just trying to get to grips with the energy of this lunation. But now, as the moon moves through late Aquarius, we're starting to get, some perspective, and we can perhaps see the truth of the matter. Maybe yesterday, Wednesday, although the full moon is about the truth, maybe that truth wasn't immediately obvious. We couldn't really sort of clearly see it. But I think things are getting easier. And if you look at what the moon is doing, the moon is making it's making a sextile to Saturn, perhaps at the beginning of the day, or especially if you're in Australia or New Zealand, and then it's moving towards a trine of Mars. And so, that trine of Mars, is quite an energetic aspect. It is about action, and the moon is making a conjunction to the North Node. And so you could say moon in Aquarius conjunct the North Node. Maybe it's a time to be objective, not to get emotionally involved with everything. Try to have some detachment, and having got some detachment, we can really be more effective. And with a moon trine Mars, we can, do something that, is constructive, but, we don't want to make things too emotional. Objectivity today, I do think really does matter. Now, yesterday we had a Sun-Jupiter conjunction. We had a Venus-Mars square. Now, that Sun-Jupiter conjunction is still very much there. The Sun and Jupiter are, sort of less than a degree apart at noon New York time. And there is a question about whether or not that Sun-Jupiter conjunction is a good thing. I think it depends. But you could say that Sun-Jupiter in Leo, that's certainly a very strong sun. Sun in its own sign, conjunct a benefic, and that might indicate, in spite of everything I've been saying about perhaps the difficulties of a full moon, it is perhaps about good fortune. and having a sense of where our sort of good fortune lies, especially now that the Sun has just moved a little bit away from Jupiter. When the Sun was exactly conjunct Jupiter, although some say that's fortunate because it's cazimi, maybe when that Sun-Jupiter conjunction was exactly, it was just too much. We weren't able to think straight. Maybe we were overdoing it. But now we can get some perspective, and we can, maybe start to see, what is possible. Additionally, we still have Venus-Mars square. That Venus-Mars square is, very much in operation right now. And I mentioned that this can be about relationships, how people get on. It can be about attraction, Venus-Mars, and it can also be about repulsion, how people relate to one another in an immediate way. Attraction is not logical; it's just there. It either exists or it doesn't exist. Likewise with repulsion, and with this Venus-Mars square, I think relationships always need to be treated with a degree of caution, because it might suggest that there is a certain lack of compatibility, which might not always be easy to rationalize. And with Mars in Gemini square Venus in Virgo, Mars in Gemini can potentially frighten Venus in Virgo. Maybe Mars has got too many ideas, or Mars seems too erratic and keeps changing its mind. Mars is still there, it's quite forceful, but Venus in Virgo just wants a quiet life. And poor Venus in Virgo is having to do quite a lot of work at the moment, because Venus is the only planet in Earth signs right now, unless you count Chiron. And so that is a problem. By the way, something I haven't mentioned is that Mercury in Cancer is the only planet in a water sign. So there's a real positive emphasis at the moment, with the air signs and the fire signs, and Mercury in Cancer, the only representative of the water signs, Venus in Virgo, the only representative of the earth signs. So there is this positivity which might be a little bit too much. Although, having said that, Venus and Mercury are personal planets, so maybe they can hold their own more than sort of some other planets. They're more sort of immediately there, more sort of immediately available. And so that's perhaps the broad picture. One thing that I should have mentioned yesterday is this question about the USA. I missed something, and what I did miss was one aspect of the USA chart that a couple of commenters mentioned it, which I kind of completely missed. Maybe I'm mentioning it too late, but if you look at the USA chart right now, so there's the USA chart, and the USA has its Mars at 21 degrees 23 Gemini. Donald Trump has his moon in 21, 22 Sagittarius. He has his sun at 21, 22. I can't remember offhand. Conjunct that Mars. So this Mars, is the Mars in the United States' chart is opposition. Opposition. His moon, and it really hits hits the full moon in his horoscope. And now we've got America's Mars return. So we've just had Mars conjunct the United States' Mars. So in terms of the United States, its foreign policy and how comfortable it's feeling about itself, and Iran and other places, and it's kind of appropriate or inappropriate that it's all happening around the time of Lindsey Graham's funeral. Lindsey Graham was, of course, an active advocate of military intervention around the world, a sort of arch neocon. So yeah, I thought I would mention that. And so anyway, I've just looked at the broad positions of the planets for today, set for New York. So let's now look at things from a perspective of Sydney, Australia. So if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, the moon is, as always, earlier in the sign. So the moon is making a sextile to Saturn. And so if you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, moon sextile Saturn is the main aspect. So, you've just had the full moon, and the moon sextile Saturn perhaps just allows you to stabilize things. I would see that aspect as being quite constructive. If you're in other parts of the world, particularly the Americas, you just might not feel that moon sextile Saturn so much. And as far as the heliocentric view is concerned, here it is. The Earth is moving away from the opposition of Jupiter in the same way that it's moving away, the Sun is moving away from the conjunction to Jupiter. So maybe things are just not quite as intense as they used to be. The Earth is moving to a sextile of Saturn, so that might be another opportunity to stabilize the situation. That's kind of what we need, isn't it? And now I want to turn to Venus. And Venus, I think, is one of the most sort of misunderstood planets. And I think that there is a side to Venus that is often not really focused on. I think that I've articulated the view that maybe there is an aspect to Venus, or a side to Venus, which is connected with war. Maybe it's a side to Venus which is connected with victory, Victoria, the Roman goddess of victory, which is Nike, is the Greek equivalent, and perhaps that's underestimated. And we think about Venus as being about peace, but maybe that's not all it's about. And if you think about Celtic mythology, there's a connection between Venus and ravens, and sort of Morrigan, the Morrigan, and that would be the goddess taking a different form, sometimes quite a negative form. The goddess as the ravens, picking up the flesh of the dead warrior, and having spent the previous night with him in her voluptuous female form. So there is a darkness to Venus, which perhaps is sometimes underestimated, or maybe people look at other things in the chart, things they want to look at true black moon Lilith and things like that, but maybe Venus is sort of giving us some information which perhaps we have been ignoring. And the reason I'm interested in Venus right now is that Venus is starting to slow down, and as far as from the Earth's perspective. And so, Venus, usually goes just over a degree every day from the Earth's perspective. Of course, it goes much faster than that, heliocentrically. And so, with Venus is in a way getting ready to go retrograde. Venus goes retrograde on October the 3rd. I mean, I know that's a long way away, but we need to think about that. And I think it goes to retrograde in Scorpio. So the build-up is kind of happening because Venus is slowing down. And, at the moment, on August the 1st, Venus is going, at 1 degree 2 minutes a day. By August the 15th, it's going 0 degrees 58 minutes a day. By September the 1st, it's going 0 degrees 48 minutes a day. So this slowdown is really starting to happen. And traditionally, when a planet is below its average speed, it starts to lose points. So just in terms of speed, we're soon going to get a situation where Venus is beginning to lose strength. Now, Venus is going to go into Libra, so we're not necessarily talking about anything that is going to really diminish Venus, immediately, and particularly when we've got all the excitement of Venus going into Libra, and Venus will be forming a grand trine with, Uranus and Pluto. So, that's still a lot to look forward to, but we kind of need to just be thinking ahead. And because the Sun and Venus are moving at the same speed, if they have an aspect, that aspect will maintain itself. And, the Sun and Venus don't have oppositions. You cannot get an opposition between the Sun and Venus. You can't get a square between the Sun and Venus. You can't get a trine between the Sun and Venus. So there are a limited number of aspects you can get between Sun and Venus. Okay, if you use harmonics, you can come up with extra aspects. But, the main aspects that you can get between the Sun and Venus are the conjunction, the semisextile, and the semisquare. And it is the semisquare that I want to talk about. And I think that there is an argument for saying that the semisquare is potentially quite a difficult aspect. So let's just look at the Sun Venus semisquare here. So here's Venus at 22 degrees 40 Virgo, and it is approximately semisquare the Sun. I mean, it's about 9 minutes off. So there's the Sun at 7 degrees 31. Now, I know that semisquare seems exact, just 9 arc minutes of orb. But, it's not like today is not the day of maximum exactitude. This semisquare aspect just continues. It continues. It's been going on for some time. It continues through August and kind of into September before it breaks down. And so, why would this semisquare aspect be unfortunate? Well, we have this bias to think that the Sun is a fortunate planet. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about Vedic astrology, that Vedic astrology, does have a different view of the Sun. I mean, the Sun, if anything in Vedic astrology, is a malefic. And if you look at the situation now, we have a strong Sun in Leo, and a weak Venus in Virgo. And so Venus is under pressure, especially given the elemental balance. Venus is the only planet in an Earth sign, and it's semisquare the Sun in Leo, an incredibly strong Sun in Leo. And so, Venus is a benefic. It's to do with relationships. Well, you could say, okay, it could be about war, and you could say that Sun's semisquare Venus is about war when you put them together. I mean, you could say that Venus is also about the milk of human kindness. Is it really? You think maybe more about Moon, but there is something harsh about Sun semisquare Venus. That harshness could be in terms of how people relate to one another and what people are actually thinking when they do stuff. There is a sort of a lack of compassion here. And maybe that lack of compassion is intensified by the fact that the North Node has left Pisces and gone into Aquarius. We're supposed to be rational now that the North Node has gone into Aquarius. And so this is not a great time to be very sort of Venusian about things. It may be difficult, and I think we just may see this atmosphere of harshness. People thinking perhaps that you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. We need to do what is necessary, and that's just the way it is. Now this Sun semisquare Venus, I've said that it will continue through into August. Now, its nature does change because Venus does move into Libra, and so if we, for example, we move forward and we say look at the situation in a couple of weeks' time, I would say middle of August. So here's the situation on August the 15th. So you can see that Venus has now moved into Libra. And the Sun is still in Leo. Now that's the semisquare in mid-August is starting to separate. It appears to be, nearly a degree apart. So in mid-August, that semisquare could, lose some of its strength. And and the sun, yes, the sun is still in Leo, but Venus at this stage can perhaps look after itself because it is in Libra, in its own sign, but still, there's still that sort of Sun-Venus semisquare feel, and look, there's now no planets. Well, there's Moon in Virgo, but the moment Moon on the 15th of August, but the moment the Moon moves into Libra, there's no planets in Earth. So again, there is a lack of grounding, and the lack of grounding can be just we act because we think it's the right thing to do, and looking at the planets a couple of weeks later, on September the 1st, Venus is still in Libra, but at this stage Venus is slowing down, and you can see that the Sun is now moving away from the semisquare of Venus, and so the exact semisquare between the Sun and the Venus just takes place a bit earlier. I'll show you the chart in a moment. Sun semisquare Venus is it is potentially difficult. Though in that case, September the 1st, Venus is in its own sign. The Sun is out of Leo, so the Sun is not so strong compared to Venus. So it's not such a it's perhaps not so difficult. And as far as the exact Sun-Venus semisquare is on August the 29th, that's something for me to talk about in a month's time. But what about the evidence? How might we see the Sun semisquare Venus? In just terms of people's charts. Of course, when I look at charts, there is a certain sort of, exaggeration here. But someone who is quite a controversial figure, who has Sun semisquare Venus. I'll start by just looking at a few people, and then I'll look at some events, Sun-Venus events. And I'm not expressing any views here, but Benjamin Netanyahu, who is in the news a great deal, of course, he has Sun semisquare Venus. In fact, a pretty close semisquare between Sun and Venus. We don't know exactly when Benjamin Netanyahu is born. I think the general consensus, he was born on late morning on October the 21st. And so Sun semisquare Venus, regardless of what signs they're in, there could well be a harshness to Benjamin Netanyahu, and he does what he has to do. And of course, if you're an opponent of Benjamin Netanyahu, you would perhaps see him as there is a certain nastiness there. But I'm not here to pass judgment on Benjamin Netanyahu. And as someone particularly notorious, who had Sun semisquare Venus, was the Emperor Caligula. So the Emperor Caligula, he didn't reign for very long, but he was a monster. If you've seen that 70s film, The Caligula, was it with Malcolm McDowell and I think Helen Mirren, and he got really bad reviews. I don't know. I haven't watched it for a bit of time, but he was this crazy emperor who. It didn't last long. He wasn't in power for very long, just a few years. I think his reign actually started off okay. Then he got sick, and when he recovered from the sickness, he became a monster. Apparently, while he was sick, he was listening to all these senators saying, "Oh, if only Caligula would recover, I would just give my life for it." And he was listening. I don't know whether that might just been Suetonius in the 12 Caesars mentioning it. Suetonius being an ancient writer who was a bit into the gossip, and so then when he recovered, he would take the senator at their word. Okay, I've recovered, now go kill yourself. So he was clearly a very unpleasant emperor. And the interesting thing about Caligula is that when he was assassinated in January AD 41, the Sun was also making a semi-square to Venus. So Caligula was born on a Sun semi-square Venus, and he was murdered or assassinated with his family, with his wife and daughter. The Praetorian Guard just had enough, and they killed him. Then Claudius became emperor. You might even say that Sun semi-square Venus, is like the Caligula aspect. But I think that is something of an exaggeration. But Sun semi-square Venus can revel in destruction, and if you're interested in the Second World War, Bomber Harris. Bomber Harris was it Air Chief Marshal Bomber Harris or whatever? He was brains behind the British bombing of German cities, and he said, "Well, you don't know if it's going, you don't know if it's going to work unless you try it." And he came up with his speech, with the Germans, you sow the wind, reap the whirlwind, and so there was something very sort of destructive about him, and whether or not it was worth his while, whether it was worth all the German civilians were killed in his bombing raids, but there is the harshness there of his Sun's Venus semi-square, which was, when I look at these semisquares, I'm looking at half a degree orbs here. I'm trying to be, really, really close about it. But with Sun semi-square Venus, to provide some balance, there can be certainly a creativity to Sun semi-square Venus. It's not all bad. If you look at Jim Morrison, he had Sun semi-square Venus, Venus in Scorpio, semi-square the Sun. So he had a particular attitude. Jim Morrison, of course, of the Doors fame, who was one of those 60s rock stars who died at the age of 27. And if you are into Apple, then Steve Jobs had Sun semi-square Venus. There it is. Sun at 5:45 Pisces. Semi-square Venus in Capricorn. So, Sun semi-square Venus, it might well be about aesthetics and how one sees things. Because Steve Jobs was obsessed about aesthetics, and so that might be how his Sun semi-square Venus was working. Someone else with Sun semi-square Venus to kind of complete the picture is the Marquis de Sade, the French writer, who, of course, the word sadist derives from his name, and so he had the Sun at 12 degrees 16 Gemini, and in fact he had an almost exact Sun-Venus semi-square. We have 2 arc minutes. That's a great thing about French people, is that we often have a time of birth for the French people, even if they're born in the 18th century. We know when the Marquis de Sade was born. So those are a few people with Sun semi-square Venus, and I just hope that you get an impression of how Sun semi-square Venus might work, in given the fact that we've just got this ongoing Sun semi-square Venus between now and early September. And as far as a few events are concerned, the idea of victory perhaps is important. The Battle of Kursk took place when the Sun was semi-square Venus. The Sun was at 12 degrees 9 Cancer, and Venus was at 27 degrees 23 Leo. So the Battle of Kursk was this huge battle between the Soviets and the Germans in 1943. The Soviets won this battle, and from then on it was all downhill. The Germans were doomed in Russia, so it was a very important battle. And perhaps this gives us the idea that Venus is the planet of victory. Maybe this says something about around the world. I mean, I was listening to a podcast, just recording, and someone was giving a view that the Russians were about to break through over the next few weeks. That the Battle of Donbass is coming to an end, regardless of what the Western press is going and is saying. And so it's kind of interesting that we've got this Sun Venus Semisquare. We had a Sun Venus Semisquare at the time of the Battle of Kursk. And of course, that's just a view. It's incredibly difficult to know what's going on in Ukraine, and it all depends who you listen to. Maybe the Western view is right. Maybe the Russians are losing and it's all a disaster for them. But there is certainly an alternative view. And continuing on the theme of Russia, there was the Beslan massacre. These are sort of Chechen separatists. They went into a school in Beslan. It was a horrific event. A lot of children were killed, and the attack happened on September the 1st, 2004. I certainly remember the news coverage, and that took place at a time of an exact semisquare Venus. And so that's just, terrorists. They do what they have to do. They couldn't care less about the lives being lost. It goes worse. It's worse than that. Just killing children, their teachers, and so forth. Sun Semisquare Venus. That may be Sun Semisquare Venus at its absolute worst, at its nastiness. And when with Sun Semisquare Venus, the concept of going back to the concept of war and the virtues of war. In 2002, Boris Johnson visited Kiev, and this was at a time when there were negotiations in Istanbul between Russia and Ukraine, and the negotiations I think they were going okay. I think the Ukrainians had agreed in principle with these Istanbul talks that basically they would give up, Donetsk and Luhansk, and in other words, Ukraine would give up less than the Russians control now. And Boris Johnson, as a representative of NATO, went to Kiev, and afterwards, the Ukrainians pulled out of these talks, and so the war continued. And of course, a huge amount of people have died on both sides, and so it's kind of interesting that Boris Johnson visited Kiev, presumably representing a particular view on the war, I assume the Western view on the war, and this was happening at a time when the Sun was semisquare Venus. And if you are into British history, 17th century history, the Gordon riots took place with Sun semisquare Venus. The Gordon riots was just a set of riots against Catholics in 1780. I mean, by 1780, you would have thought people, the religious wars were long gone, but Lord Gordon stirred up the mob to attack Catholics and I think Catholic buildings and so on. And this took place with the Sun making a pretty close semisquare to Venus, and just continuing on the overall sort of unpleasantness of Sun semisquare Venus. Saddam Hussein attacked a nerve gas attack on a Kurdish town. The Kurdish town of Halabja took place when the Sun was semisquare Venus. In fact, on the day that he dropped the nerve gas on this Kurdish town, there was an exact Sun semisquare Venus. And also in the 1980s was Heysel Stadium, when I think Liverpool were playing Juventus in the final of the European Cup, and a lot of people were killed, mainly Juventus supporters. And looking at the chart of the Heysel Stadium, again there was a very close Sun-Venus semisquare. So I think you're getting a picture that Sun-Venus semisquare that we have at the moment is just a really difficult, really quite nasty aspect. And if you've been following what's going on in Poland, a lot of Poles have been very upset about the Ukrainian attitude to the Volhynian massacres, when Poles were, both Jews and others, were massacred by Ukrainian sort of right-wing, far-right nationalists towards the end of the Second World War. And so one of the places, or I think this is a view, but when the massacre started, was the Kislalin massacre on July the 11th, 1943, when Ukrainians massacred a load of a Polish village. And again, there is our Sun Venus semisquare, Sun in Cancer semisquare, Venus in Virgo. And El Salvador, Archbishop Romero, who was canonized not so long ago, he was murdered by right-wing death squads on March 24th, 1980, when the Sun and Venus were within half a degree of a Sun semisquare Venus. So that's again. And one other thing is the killing of Trotsky, when Stalin's agents tracked him down. One of his agents tracked him down in Mexico City. I think killed him with an ice axe. Isn't that right? And so, and that took place when the Sun and Venus were within half a degree of a Sun semisquare Venus. So I'm really sorry to be so negative and to give you this sort of litany of unpleasantness, but I just wanted to give a different view of Sun Venus, and it's a relatively common aspect, and I've tried to restrict myself to events and people where the aspect is exact within half a degree, and maybe it's just a biased sample, but it is a time when the Sun and Venus are making a difficult aspect, and perhaps we just need to reconsider the Sun-Venus relationship. And now I want to turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, July the 30th, 2026. Aries. When you look at these daily videos, you're presumably looking for some change. You don't want me to repeat myself. But in some respects, what's going on today is, maybe a bit like yesterday, except maybe not quite so intense. So, yesterday, Wednesday, we had a full moon, and I did regard the full moon as being, quite a major event. This full moon, was in Aquarius, the moon in Aquarius, sun in Leo, and I certainly thought that it might have a big impact on Aries. And as far as today is concerned, well, it's really the sort of the aftermath or even the aftershock of the full moon. The moon is still in Aquarius. The sun is, still in Leo. So some of the basic challenges of yesterday, are still around. But yeah, they are a little more easygoing. You can sort of get things in perspective, and when you look at what's happening, it may actually feel that you have maybe more choice. I think you had quite a lot of choice yesterday. I think you could have yesterday done several different things. Being an Aries, you like to be able to make the choice, be the one who takes the initiative, and in a way, Aries, you can sort of continue to be in that position, and you continue to have the enthusiasm and also the sense of purpose needed to get things done, to be able to see things through. And perhaps you now realize today, more than yesterday, that you're not alone, that you live in a social world, and in fact that you can take advantage of, what is on offer, perhaps what other people have on offer. And, indeed, that is the right way to go. We have, the moon in Aquarius making a conjunction to the North Node in Aquarius. So yeah, the North Node, at least the true North Node, has changed sign now. It did change sign a few days ago, but perhaps now you're starting to really feel it. Given that the moon is in Aquarius, so you can start to think about what it is that you would not just like to do, but what you would be happy doing. And that may say something about your ambitions for the future, not your material ambitions, but your wider ambition. What kind of future would you like to imagine for yourself? And many of us find the future to be something really quite challenging, to be something frightening, because we don't know what's going to happen next. It just does seem difficult. And, there is that view of the future, but it is something that is imposed upon us, that the future is waiting for us, and we don't know what it is, and we kind of have to accept it. But, it is more interactive than that. So, as you go forward, you're able to negotiate this future, and, it is a negotiation between what is objectively out there and, the kind of person you are and your particular niche. And, when you find your niche, of course, you are going to feel, pretty happy. I mean, that's the way it goes. Once we find who we are, what we're meant to be doing, we just feel that we have arrived. And so that might give you a sense that things are coming together, and as the moon moves into late Aquarius, it starts to make a trine to Mars. I mean, in fact, it's made a sort of a sextile to Saturn and then a trine to Mars. So at the beginning of the day, in fact, maybe yesterday, the moon was making a sextile to Saturn. So moon sextile Saturn, it was quite a constructive aspect. Saturn is in Aries, and with moon sextile Saturn, this does give you a chance to get yourself together and sort of exercise some discipline, decide what is important. Then moon moving on, making the sextile, making the trine to Saturn, then you see the possibility of action, constructive action, and maybe quite easy action, because this is, moon trine Mars. That allows things to move. It allows you to communicate, to maybe, tell everyone what's on your mind. And it's, it's move as well, as in just be able to just move your body even, just be able to, just not feel certainly sort of uptight about things. You can just go with the flow. And so there may be something quite physical about that moon trine Mars, even though it is in air signs. There isn't actually a lot of Earth right now in the sky, except Venus and Virgo. But I think that you can give the impression that you are absolutely present, and I think that you can communicate, with a certain amount of power, and certainly a lot of optimism. Though one aspect that has persisted, I did sort of mention at the beginning of this piece on Aries that you often get the situation where things don't change day to day. And yesterday we had a square between Venus and Mars. This Venus-Mars square is still operational. It's still really quite close, and this Venus-Mars square, it could be troublesome, and it might just be about your impact on other people, and how you occur to them. And I don't think that the Venus-Mars square is as intense as yesterday, but we've still got a situation where Venus and Mars are only half a degree away from the exact square. So do think about what you say and how other people relate to what you say. Almost like think of every word as it comes out of your mouth. And, it's sometimes possible to freeze your words when they're half out of your mouth. You kind of know that you're saying something you shouldn't. And, you'd like to say it. It might be sort of good for your ego, but it's probably unwise. And so when you treat or deal with people, consider the possibility that they are delicate, that they want a quiet life. They don't necessarily want a surprise. They're not necessarily interested in your ideas, particularly the more controversial ideas that you might have. So if you show some consideration, and that's going to make things easier, because if you just do what you want, you say what you like with that Venus square Mars, you might undermine things. And also, it's important not to be selfish with Venus square Mars. It might be that other people have particular systems, particular plans, particular routines, which are very important to them. And when they go wrong, that can really mess things up. And so that's that can cause real sort of destruction. Of course, it's not just people can mess things up. I noticed in the news. I mean, I know this is not strictly relevant, but every year or twice a year, the Washington state of Washington has bar exams, and so they had these bar exams in this city called Yakima, which is in sort of eastern part, sort of it's away from Seattle, and I think there were over 600 law students. They wanted to take their bar exams, and they converged on this place in Yakima, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere. And they came from all over the place. There are people that came from the other side of the world, and then there was a glitch, and they couldn't sort out the internet, and so the bar exams got cancelled, and it was a sort of a major disaster, major inconvenience. And so, I mean, I'm not saying you're like the cancelling of the bar exams, but that just gives you an illustration of how messing things up can have consequences. People might have careful plans. You might not be aware of what people have done to arrive at where they are, the effort that it has taken, and then you might just through your casual approach or just something you hadn't thought about, you say something or you make a suggestion. It seems trivial, but other people have put a lot of trouble into something, and you might be the disruptor. So make sure you're not the disruptor, unless, of course, Aries, you feel that there is something out there that really does need to be disrupted. Taurus. The moon is still in Aquarius, and we're still kind of dealing with the full moon. So the full moon was yesterday, Wednesday, and so the moon is still in Aquarius, the sun is still in Leo, so we very much still have that full moon energy. And with that full moon energy, you continue to be, I think, quite ambitious. In fact, you might have a new sense of ambition, because yesterday, Wednesday, that full moon was exact, and when you had that full moon, that exact full moon, it might have been just a little bit difficult to deal with. It was just a bit too intense, and there were just things that you didn't necessarily want to deal with, and you might at the same time have found it difficult to objectify things, because when we're talking about the full moon, what I like to say about the full moon is that a full moon can be a time of revelation. You see the picture for what it is. And once you see the truth, well, what can you do? You have to accept that truth. you don't want to, take the view that ignorance is bliss. This is not a time where ignorance is bliss. Knowledge should always be sought after, but at that precise moment of a full moon, like yesterday, it might have been, a bit uncertain because the moon was, almost transfixed, by the sun when that opposition was exact. When that opposition was exact, but now that the moon is moving away from the opposition, there is some objectivity. This may actually be the time when you do actually start to see the truth, understand the truth, and the truth about yourself and what you want to do and what is important for you. And this might well say something about your ambitions. And if you have an ambition or set of ambitions, Taurus, that is great. And I think that you can really trust yourself to choose the right goals for yourself, especially now that the North Node is in Aquarius, but you're still aware of those Leo planets, and you can see many of the things which may stand in the way of your ambitions. It might be things that you have taken too seriously in the past. You've listened to too much. You've got to listen to some extent, but you can't completely listen. And I'm thinking, for example, your family, your home, what is important to you, your roots. All of these things do matter, but they can't matter to the exclusion of everything else. And part of having a moon in Aquarius and a South Node in Aquarius could actually be to differentiate yourself, to not just think independently, but to make it clear that there are some things which are you and cannot be compromised. And in the process, you've got to embrace the new. And if you've got an impulse to do something, to experiment with something, I think I said yesterday that the sign Aquarius can be connected with technology, and so that is certainly a way in which you can sort of move forward. So don't be afraid of technology. Just because you never used a particular device before or a computer program before, you might think it's just too complicated. You'd prefer to do things in the old way, but do embrace the new. It is the right thing for you to do. And another thing we perhaps need to consider is how you are impacted by the other, the outside world, and that might include your family as well. And there is a feeling today of separation. Perhaps you feel you need to be separate. That is perhaps the right approach. And if you are too closely involved, with society at large, with other people, maybe partners, members of your family, that could hold you up. And you kind of know it would hold you up. And, you might be concerned, Taurus, that you just come over as being just too distant, a bit too detached, maybe even a bit selfish. But I wouldn't worry about that. There are some things that you do well on your own, especially now. And if you are completely, wound up with everything else going on around you, that could slow you down. And that's not necessarily something you want to do. And as far as relationships are concerned, we do have at the moment this ongoing Venus-Mars square. Now, this Venus-Mars square is not as powerful as it was yesterday, but it's still pretty powerful. I mean, Venus and Mars are just half a degree from each other, and Venus is slowly moving away from the square of Mars. So that could be about you being able to distance yourself from a difficult situation. And you're just feeling that you just need that space, and perhaps being a little bit harsh in the process. And I think that is, I think the right approach. Particularly if you feel that a particular relationship has not been working for you, or just you need some distance. I think that's something you can achieve. But still, with Venus square Mars, certain people can be a problem. They can say things that are a little concerning. And that especially is the case when it comes to the area of money. People have their own views about money, and they might be a bit cavalier with their money. They might perhaps put pressure on you financially. So these people, you might not know them well, but always ask, why is someone doing what they're doing? And so, there could be a financial dimension to it. But, relationships in general, close relationships, and maybe in particular, you shouldn't regard them as the be-all and end-all. And, perhaps you just ask yourself, how much is the other person respecting you? I mean, this is a time, as I've already said, Taurus, when you need to be thinking about what you want to do, what is important to you, and if you're getting support from the outside world, all well and good, but not everyone is going to be supportive. And you might find that, there are a couple of people who have other ideas, who want you to do something else. But really, Aquarius, it is a time to differentiate, to realize, what is important to you. And if you identify something as important to you, then I think that you really should go with it. Gemini. You can see what's around you, what is possible, what is available, and I know that many people might be feeling just a general sense of concern. It all sounds a bit difficult, doesn't it? With this full moon that we've just had. The full moon can be really quite a tough influence. But you, Gemini, have not really been as influenced by this full moon as most other people. You're perhaps able to an extent to sort of observe the full moon and not get sort of tied up with it. And I think that you have been able to sort of maintain your good spirits, and you look at things are changing, and Geminis like the concept of change, at least in theory, and so you can see things unfolding and perhaps becoming more exciting, and I think you're aware of real possibilities, and if the world is changing, if society is changing, it might seem to you, Gemini, that that does give you new opportunities. So be ready to embrace those possibilities, and don't be caught up in the detail. You can sometimes make the mistake of thinking too much. We might say, well, there's this possibility and that's possibility, and let's sort of weigh it all up, and there are pros and cons, and let's not commit ourselves, and as a result, nothing gets done. So that's always a danger. Perhaps that's just the nature of being a Gemini. Geminis do find it sometimes difficult to really, see. The broader picture. They just can't do it, or at least it's difficult. They do really try, but you just get caught up on one thing and you can't move beyond it. And but now I think you do have an opportunity to move beyond it. With this full moon, and you just have to perhaps have a little bit of discipline, mental discipline, intellectual discipline, and I think that's something that you can develop. And if you do try to make the effort to raise things to a new level. I do think that you'll be supported because, the moon in Aquarius is making a trine to Mars. Mars is still in Gemini. Mars is still providing results in Gemini. And so, with Mars in Gemini, this is a time, Gemini, when, you're able to assert yourself. I mean, very often Mars in Gemini might work through perhaps the verbal side of things, but it needn't just be verbal. It's perhaps about you just having an idea which might be quite unusual, could be a demonstration of your new broad-mindedness, just going beyond your usual limits. And maybe at first you talk about it, but then you see the possibility of action. And, you might in the process be supported. The moon makes a sextile to Saturn and it makes a trine to Mars. So that moon sextile Saturn, that moon sextile Saturn may be more about yesterday, more about the beginning of the day. But, moon sextile Saturn could be that you're, for example, contemplating an action. It's something you'd like to do. It might seem to be a bit risky. You don't quite know how it's going to work out. Maybe you'll get some good advice with moon sextile Saturn. You might just need to sort a few things out. Have another look at the world around you, make sure you've got everything right, make a few changes to your plans, but, not big changes. And then with Moon trine Saturn, you can really sort of move forward, and you can, because Gemini, right now you can really start to, see what is possible. But, in terms of advice, you don't want to necessarily get advice from people who are really close to you. People, I'm talking about people, you might have, it might be a friend or maybe someone you don't know very well. But if you try to get advice from people who are super close to you, well, they might have their own biases. Biases about you, biases about what you are capable of, biases about what you are not capable of. And so those closest to you may not be able to give you a clear, objective answer. I mean, they'll give you an answer. They might try their best to be helpful, but there's still something else going on. So if you know someone really well, if they know you really well, or if you're in a close relationship with them, it's not that they're a bad person. No, they mean well, but just right now they can't see things entirely clearly. So be careful in that kind of situation, and make sure that you don't take any one person's word for it. Particularly, if that person is close to you. Cancer, Moon is still in Aquarius, and it's really the aftermath of the full moon. So we had this full moon, which, at least in theory, as far as I could see, this full moon, did look pretty dramatic, for everyone. Maybe you included, although when I'm talking about dramatic full moons, I'm thinking sort of more about the world in general. I mean, I haven't really looked at the news. I'm making this recording actually on when am I making the recording? On sort of Wednesday morning Pacific, and I don't know what's happening. Iran. Are hostilities continuing? I don't know. But, from an individual perspective, this full moon is, I think, quite survivable, because as individuals, we do have a choice, and we can be flexible. And so, with the moon still moving through Aquarius, I suspect, Cancer, that it's easier than yesterday. We don't have that intensity anymore, because when the moon was exactly opposition the sun, it just might have felt that just things were stuck. You could see how things were difficult, and it just might have felt that you didn't really, understand things fully because it was just too complicated and just there was too much to try and work out. But now that the moon is moving away from the opposition to the sun, I think that things are actually improving, and I think that you've got more choices, and I think in your own way, you can really start to sort of get things together. And the moon in Aquarius, it makes a sextile to Saturn, and then it moves on to a trine to Mars. In fact, looking at the main aspects today from a UK perspective, because I have a sort of a list of where the planets are and the aspects they make. That's set for UK time, and certainly from a UK perspective, there are really only two aspects today: Moon sextile Saturn, Moon sextile Mars. So that is a lot to have to work on, or rather, sorry, let me rephrase that. There's not much to work on. I mean, there are other things to be looking at, and there are things that persist from day to day, but the only two aspects today, London time, are Moon sextile Saturn, Moon trine Mars, and that might mean that those aspects can work more effectively than usual. Particularly that Moon trine Mars, because that Moon sextile Saturn, is possibly an aspect more about yesterday. I think if you're in Australia or New Zealand, then that Moon sextile Saturn, might be of greater relevance. But we know with Moon sextile Saturn, still, you have a chance to, get yourself together and to be organised and to focus on the important things, perhaps important things you were thinking about yesterday, Wednesday, but you didn't really want to deal with them. But now maybe you can deal with them, and not just deal with them in a constructive way, but you can actually do something important, actually create some action with Moon trine Mars. Moon trine Mars is a very active aspect. So if there's something you feel that needs to be done, and you want to do it in your own way, perhaps you want to be quite independent about it, and additionally, you might feel that it's not really a time to be discussing your motivations. You don't want to have to explain yourself. I think that is important. Explaining yourself, I think that's the last thing you want to do. I mean, it's enough to be able to explain things to yourself, and I think this is one thing I did say yesterday in my horoscope for Cancer. You can rationalize things, not just rationalize things, but verbalize things as well. And the process continues. Having verbalized something, perhaps understood, what the full moon is all about. With this Moon trine Mars, I think that you can really, start to take action, and start to take action, in your own way. And if you were to explain what you were doing, then you might get a negative reaction. You might run into disagreement. You might be asked questions that you may not really want to answer. So Cancer, there is an argument here for just being maybe just ever so slightly secretive. It's not because we're living in a secretive time. It is the full moon. I mean, broadly speaking, the full moon is about revelation, being open about things. But I think with this full moon, perhaps the key thing for you, Cancer, is to be open to yourself. There may have been things which were existing at an unconscious or a private level. You weren't engaging with them, but with a full moon really makes things obvious to you. And now that things are obvious to you, now that you're able to be open with yourself, then you can start taking constructive action. Leo, there is, of course, a lot going on in a Leo, and it might be the case now that we've had the full moon. Okay, we had the full moon yesterday. That maybe there's a bit less pressure, and you can look at things in a way that is just easier and perhaps more relaxing, and indeed sort of perhaps a purer way, because with this full moon there was something that you might have been trying to grapple with, something that you were kind of being forced to pay attention to. I mean, you didn't really want to pay attention to it. You didn't really feel though that you had much choice. You just had to do it, and other people had their demands on you. I mean, people still have their demands on you. You know, the moon is in Aquarius, your opposite sign. Of course, it's moving to the North Node, so it's certainly, Leo, not a time to be selfish. As the moon moves to a conjunction of North Node, you certainly have to be aware of external demands, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you actually have to give in to external demands. You can now perhaps focus on the fact that, the sun is in Leo, the sun is making a conjunction to Jupiter, and perhaps part of the full moon was about making it clear to you what was, actually possible. And, if you think about it, so Jupiter's gone into your sign quite recently. Jupiter stays in your sign for the next year, and Jupiter is a fortunate planet, as I keep saying. Probably becoming boring at this stage about it, but with Jupiter going through Leo, lots of things going on. This can be a time when you can really be yourself, and take advantage, all the opportunities, that are coming your way. So that's all true. And, with the sun making a conjunction to Jupiter, and remember, the sun is your ruler. I mean, the sun really benefits from this conjunction to Jupiter. Now, perhaps with yesterday's full moon, you weren't fully able to take advantage of that Sun-Jupiter conjunction, but now that Sun-Jupiter conjunction is a kind of a purer force, even though the Sun is starting to move away from that conjunction to Jupiter. But perhaps with the Sun conjunct Jupiter, you might be thinking that, or you might be becoming aware that if you're too closely focused on the result, on the actual thing that you are looking for, the thing that you want to happen, then that might actually stop it happening. And now that the sun is moving away from Jupiter, there's more breathing room. There's perhaps more breathing room for your natural luck to operate. And so do make sure, Leo, that you're in a position where you have the chances, you create the chances, and that means having a bit of flexibility. So if we're talking about luck and things improving, things getting even better, not just improving, but things looking really good, if you're too inflexible, then you could say, well, you don't allow the luck and you don't allow the possibilities to ever develop. So having some space, really does matter. And so have the flexibility to be aware of an opportunity, as it comes your way. Don't just be so stubborn that good luck comes your way or something really wonderful comes your way, and you just ignore it. And so I think perhaps, Leo, compared with yesterday, that you have greater flexibility, and do look at what other people are doing. The moon is still in Aquarius, still in your opposite sign, and as I just mentioned, moon conjunct the North Node. It is important to be aware of what's happening in a social and interpersonal way. And the moon is making a trine to Mars in air signs. And so, moon trine Mars in air signs, it doesn't have the intensity of a moon trine Mars in, say, water signs, or the crazy excitement of moon trine Mars in fire signs, but it's about mental action. It's perhaps about being able to talk, be able to discuss what's on your mind. It needn't be too intense, and it could be with Moon in Aquarius that you can get an unbiased opinion. There is a lot of emotion flying around. Well, there was a lot of emotion flying around. We've only got the only planet in a water sign actually now is Mercury in Cancer, and so if we're looking for if you're looking for something sort of objective with not so much emotion, just someone just being able to look at the facts for you and just giving you an unbiased opinion, with the moon making a sextile to Saturn and then a trine to Mars, then I think that's something you can get. So, yeah, you've got to be independent up to a point, but, getting an alternative view and just being able to accept an alternative view, I think that is important. When you're told something that you don't necessarily want to hear, then that can be challenging, and so you might want to sort of dig your heels in and tell someone they're wrong. But it's not like that. It really isn't. And I should of course also point out that the Sun is semisquare Venus. The Sun is on and off semisquare Venus until early September. I mean, and I talked about it at the beginning of this video. So there's always that potential for thinking when you're dealing with another person with semisquare Venus that there's something not quite right. There's maybe a general lack of compatibility, or it's someone going in a sort of different direction than you, and it's easy perhaps to jump to a conclusion to say this is not right, to feel that you need to be distant, because if someone is on a different wavelength than you, well, why persist? But maybe with this Sun semisquare Venus, it is something that needs to be worked on, and you have to find perhaps exactly the right way of dealing with individual people. Everyone is an individual. You can't make assumptions about anyone, based on surface appearances. So you find the unique way of dealing with different people, and that perhaps allows you to make progress. And so it's not a case that just because you find an incompatibility with another person, but that's the way it has to be. And as I have been saying for quite a long time, your ability to get on with people, to attract their attention, in a fortunate way right now, is really very good. You can come over as being appealing as someone who really is worth the effort, because I think that right now, especially with the Sun and Jupiter in Leo, you can come over as someone who is quite special. Virgo. The full moon is not as strong as it was. The full moon was exact yesterday, and so it's losing some of its power, but it's still operational to an extent. I mean, the moon in Aquarius is still opposition the Sun in Leo, but that opposition, certainly from sort of a US perspective, the moon is 12 degrees off that opposition, at least from the perspective of New York at noon. So with the full moon past its maximum power, it just might feel that things are just a little bit easier, and that there's maybe more room to breathe, and you can start to think about how you want to respond, how you want to sort things out, how you want to just generally organize things. Being a Virgo, sometimes organization can be important, particularly now, because one thing that has been going on is that we've had less and less Earth, and now we only have one planet in an Earth sign, and that's Venus. I mean, Venus is an important planet, that's true, but it's having to do a lot of work, being that sole planet in an Earth sign, and you have a brave face, but it still means that you have to really make an effort in terms of keeping things under control, making sure that you're not messed up, making sure that you're not disturbed, that you don't want to be in a situation where your plans have to constantly change. But I think that right now you can think things through, and you have an idea about how things should be organized, and do use new technology perhaps to help you. You don't have to hold everything in your head. You're thinking. You might have a good memory for things that need to be, for example, done at particular times of day, particular days of a week. So you're holding a lot in your mind, but maybe assistance is available. There might be technology that can help. I don't know, planners, alarms, other systems for organizing things, spreadsheets. I mean, obviously many of these things have been available for decades, half a century or whatever, but see what is available. You don't have to do everything on your own, and perhaps you should regard technology as a way to help you, and you don't have to just do things the old way, or or completely rely on your memory. But it's not just about how you keep everything sort of organized and on a level footing. It's also about seeing what is around you, understanding what is around you. You're in a position where, in fact, Virgo, compared to perhaps most other signs, you probably have a fair amount of freedom. You can see things as they are, and you don't have to accept any one person's point of view. I think you're probably quite a difficult person to influence. Once you've made up your mind about something, then I think that you're going to hold with it. And additionally, Virgo, you actually, if you make the effort, you can see what is possible. There have been a lot of changes recently, and many people might be worried about these changes, but these changes really can work for you. And some of these changes might relate to technology and how you can utilize it. And one aspect that we do need to consider is a square between Venus and Mars. And in fact, we've got two aspects involving Mars. We've got the Moon trine Mars, and we've got Venus square Mars. So yesterday the Venus-Mars square was exact. Today it's still pretty exact. And when I talked about that Venus-Mars square, I think I was pretty positive about it. I mean, it sounds potentially difficult, but with this Venus-Mars square, it does trigger your ambitions. Mars is still in Gemini. Mars is still in the same sign as Uranus, and with Venus square Mars, with some effort, you're able to use your charms in such a way that you can move closer towards the achievement of some of your ambitions. So it's important to really think about what you want. The Venus-Mars square might only become a problem if you don't know what you want. You just don't know. You're open-minded. You don't have a plan. You feel sort of listless and unconnected, and you don't know. Well, yeah. In that case, Venus-Mars could be a real problem. You could find that you're really buffeted this way and that by other people, outside demands, or trying to fit in. Yeah, it might not be easy. But if you do know what you want, then I think that Venus square Mars is going to be really helpful. You can start to own that Mars. Mars is an assertive energy. It can become part of the way you move forward, and you can really, explain what it is you'd like to happen, and your ambitions will be quite clear. And at the same time, with Moon trine Mars, your ability to organize things and take control and to clear out the garbage from the past and to remove the chaos that's getting in your way. It's all there, and I think it will also be appreciated, particularly if you're going into work today. But it doesn't have to be about going into work or career. It's just about you being very proactive in terms of moving towards your goals, whatever those goals might be. But it's important you have goals. It's important you have targets. But only a problem if you don't have anything you're moving towards. But Virgo, I think deep down you do know what you want. Libra. I should start by saying that I really do think that it can be a good day. Yet I do want to mention the fact that the Sun is making a semi-square to Venus. Now, the Sun has been making a semi-square to Venus for some time, and it will continue to make a semi-square to Venus for the next month and more into September. And so, it is an ongoing influence, and it's not something I've really talked about so far, certainly with reference to you. And I think you perhaps need to think about it. And so what are we talking about here? Venus is your ruler, and right now Venus is in Virgo, and Venus is 45 degrees from the Sun. And when we think about the Sun, we see this as being a very important planet in astrology. It sounds kind of interesting, maybe invigorating, having Sun semi-square Venus, but the semi-square is a potentially difficult aspect. And with Sun semi-square Venus, there just may be times or when you feel that something is weighing in on you, and it perhaps is just preventing you from expressing yourself in quite the way you'd like. And at the moment, that could be another person, not necessarily a partner or someone really close to you. It just may be someone you just know, or a group of people you know. And the Sun is strong. It's in Leo, and so the tendency to think, the Sun is in Leo, that's great. But if the Sun is in Leo, that means that something in your way is strong, something preventing you from fully being yourself is strong. And this might mean that it is a time when you always need to think about your own independence, and think about who you are interacting with, and what are they trying to achieve, and are they supportive of everything you're doing. And they might not be. And so don't just take the situation as it stands. And now that the South Node has moved into Leo, it is possible that some people are not good for you. Again, I must make it clear, I'm not saying everyone is no good for you. There just might be a couple of people, a couple of situations that you keep coming back to, you keep getting involved in, and it's just preventing you from, being yourself. And, at the moment, don't forget Venus is in Virgo. Your ruler is in Virgo. And Venus is not as strong as it could be. I mean, Venus in Virgo, Venus is fallen. And, right now, Venus is square Mars. And so that just might mean, Libra, you're just aware of things that could be in your way. And I think it's okay to look after your own interests, for you to decide what you need to do, to be tough, to be an individual, to put yourself first. And I think, if you can do that, I don't think that this Sun semisquare Venus, is such a problem. And, also, don't forget that very soon Venus will be moving into Libra. So it's that's Venus moving into Libra is definitely a good thing, because Venus is moving into your sign. But as I said at the beginning of this video, Venus is slowing down. Slowly, it's slowing down, and it's not as fast as it was a few weeks ago. So with Venus slowing down, you at some level are slowing down. And okay, it's a long process, and it's not until October the 3rd that Venus actually goes retrograde. But you could argue almost that the process is starting, and that you need to be aware that there are things and people and situations that you can't always deal with effectively, and if something is undermining you, then stay away from it. I think that is something you can do. So, if you like, that is a downside, but on the plus side, we do have the moon moving through Aquarius, and the moon is making a trine to Mars, and the moon is making a trine to Libra in a way. I mean, I know it might sound a bit weird, the moon making a trine to a sign, but I think you can see astrology like that. I mean, Mars is making a trine to Libra as well, so you could say that moon trine Mars, and then you've got Libra, so there's kind of a bit of an air grand trine working. So as far as today is concerned, I think that you have the ability to do things which you enjoy. And that is important. The moon is moving towards a conjunction with the North Node. Yeah, because the North Node, at least the true North Node, has now gone into Aquarius, and that is about you valuing yourself. It's not about outside opinions. It's not what another person says. It's about what you know is the truth, what you believe is the truth. I think it goes beyond the belief. It goes just what you know is the truth about you and what you could be doing. And that also links with the full moon. So we had this full moon, and part of what the full moon is about is showing you the way forward, and also showing you, perhaps what has been holding you back. And moon trine Mars does allow you to be energetic, and the moon has just moved from a sextile to Saturn, and now it's moving on to the trine of Mars. So moon making those constructive aspects to Saturn and Mars, it does mean that not everyone is a problem. There are definitely certain people who are really there for you, and you're looking for people who have a positive approach, people who want the best for you, who can sort of offer a new view of the world, and further than that could offer sort of new opportunities, but opportunities which are completely in accord with who you are. And so, going back to the Sun semisquare Venus and Moon trine Mars, perhaps there are two ways of going about today. There is perhaps the wrong way, which is just getting tied up with the wrong people, perhaps doing their bidding or listening too much to them. Yeah, that's one approach. But the other approach is just doing what feels right and what you feel good about, what you enjoy, and finding people who are supportive. And if there's no one who is supportive, it doesn't matter. You can just do things your way, and you'll be definitely taking the right approach. Scorpio. So Scorpio, we have continued activity in Leo, and as I was saying yesterday, the sign Leo really is important for you, particularly now that we have got a Sun-Jupiter conjunction in Leo, and I really do think that this the Sun-Jupiter conjunction can work for you. So, yesterday the Sun and Jupiter were exactly conjunct, and it might have been, Scorpio, that was too much of a good thing. All of that energy, Jupiter blasted by that exact conjunction. But now that the Sun is moving away from Jupiter, you have some sort of objectivity, greater objectivity, and perhaps you can look at the full moon in a way that is reasonable, because we had the full moon yesterday and we've still got a full moon today, but the Sun and the Moon are separating from one another. I mean, noon New York time, the Sun and the Moon are 12 degrees apart, so the full moon is very much past peak. But now you can you can think about it. You can be more objective, and you can think about what it is that you want to achieve. And I think there's obviously a great deal that you want. The word desire is an important keyword for Scorpios. There are things you desire. They are very real. You should not be ashamed of desiring them, especially if they're related to acclaim and success. And at the same time, you can see the obstacles. You can see, what might be getting in your way. You can see the other things that you maybe need to consider. For example, what is going on in your family, in your home, the sources of your security. And perhaps yesterday, when the full moon was exact, it might all have seemed a bit too much, and you just felt that you didn't really want to deal with it. It might have even felt that it was just one thing or the other. But now you can see possibilities, in both directions. You can see that you can look after yourself, look after your security and emotional needs, but also move forward with optimism. Recently Scorpios have been optimistic. Deep down, it's that deep optimism that just knows that everything's going to be okay, that if you handle things correctly, then really there isn't really so much to worry about. And the moon in Aquarius is making a trine to Mars, and moon trine Mars is certainly a fortunate aspect, especially for you, because Mars rules Scorpio. And so with moon trine Mars, it could be about a reconciliation. It could be about something that you thought was a problem. You thought it was holding you back. You may have been worrying about it, obsessing about it, and with this moon trine Mars, you start to see possibilities. You start to see the options, and then it occurs to you that really, Scorpio, you've actually got a considerable amount of freedom, and it's nothing necessarily that has to be talked about. It's all very natural, and then you may actually be thinking that some concern you had is really nothing to worry about. And so if there's something you've been meaning to do, then now is a time when you can actually do it. And the moon is also starting to move towards a conjunction of the North Node. And I think with the conjunction to North Node, you can afford to be reasonable. You can maybe look at something which is really quite fundamental to who you are. It might be something to do with, could be something to do with your home, or it could be connected with land or property or real estate. Something that you perhaps not done, but you've been meaning to do it. And with the moon conjunct the North Node, you can kind of connect with it. And it doesn't really matter what your situation is. Everyone has to live somewhere. Everyone has to have some relationship to the four walls, whatever those four walls are, whether you own those four walls, whether you don't, it doesn't matter. That there's something you can do. And also with moon conjunct the North Node, it could be just a time to be thinking about your family and maybe even your extended family. The right thing to do might be, for example, to get in touch with a member of your family who you haven't talked to for years or decades. You're out of touch, you've fallen out with one another, but if you are able to make that connection, I think you'll realize that was definitely something very healthy. I think it's healthy, and it allows you to connect with the past, and also connect with who you are. Sagittarius. The moon continues to move through Aquarius, and it's still opposition to the sun, but the full moon was yesterday, and with the moon moving through Aquarius, late Aquarius, you're feeling that things are starting to move, things are starting to work. The full moon yesterday just could have been a bit exhausting, and it just, you could have felt ever so slightly short-circuited. Okay, I know short-circuits are something, it's either short-circuited or it's not short-circuited. Can it be partially short-circuited? Well, I don't know. But anyway, now that the moon is in late Aquarius, I think you're just feeling better, and there's just more freedom. And you can perhaps experiment, with different ideas, different people. You can give things a go, and I think that is important, to give things a go. Because there is always some danger that you take the view that you just can't do something. So if you can't do something, then there's no point in trying. Or you might be able to be, well, this is not part of your experience, part of your life. So you're just not going to want to involve yourself with it. But with the moon now moving in through late Aquarius, moving towards a conjunction with the North Node, it might be a time to perhaps do some gentle learning. Maybe there's something you need to learn about. You've known it has existed. You kind of know in theory it could be helpful, but you haven't wanted to bother with it. But now I think you can be bothered with it. And if you learn something new, it just might be sort of a new skill, or how to operate something. I'm not talking about anything major. I'm not talking about learning a language or anything like that. It could just be something very simple that will make your life easier. And if you don't know about something, if you don't understand something, then there's no harm in asking. So if you ask for help, if you ask for an explanation, then with the moon making not just a conjunction of a North Node, but it's also making a trine to Mars, I think that the help will be forthcoming. And so the more you can learn about things, in a simple, straightforward way, the better. Additionally, the sun is moving away from a conjunction to Jupiter. And so, yesterday there was an exact Sun-Jupiter conjunction, And I'm not convinced that that was necessarily such a good thing. Jupiter just could have felt, overwhelmed by the sun, frazzled by the sun. But now that the sun is moving away from Jupiter, Jupiter, of course, is your ruler. In general, you have more space, you have more sort of room to maneuver, and you have also sort of Sagittarius, more room to explore. You can see what is available. You're not constrained anymore. And what could constrain you? I mean, what could constrain you might be your own ideas or your own philosophical view, and it has been something that I have been talking about over the last week or so. That sometimes one's own ideas or set of ideas, philosophies, principles, and so on, can hold you back. They're just too rigid, and some of that rigidity is breaking down now. But now that the sun is past the conjunction with Jupiter, and you can start to give yourself genuine choices. The world is perhaps genuinely available to you. It's no longer a situation where your world is limited by your own views, your own past, your own opinions. And this is not just about today. Jupiter stays in Leo for the next year, and so hopefully while Jupiter is moving through Leo between now and July of 2027, it will be a time when you can really expand your horizons in an open-minded way and not be constrained by the past. So in general, Sagittarius, I do think that things are looking really pretty good, and additionally, like yesterday, I think that you're able to really give a good account of yourself, and you can get attention. And if there's something you want, I mean, you can get it. If you really want to impose your will on another person or a group of people, you can. More so than usual. But you do have to ask yourself whether it's necessarily the right thing to do. What you don't want to do, Sagittarius, is get yourself into a situation where you have a belief about the world, perhaps a long-standing belief about the world, and you try to validate that belief about the world by imposing that belief on other people. I think you're a good propagandist right now. You can change people's minds, but you can change people's minds about something which you yourself should be moving on from. So you don't want to be inflexible, for sure, but you don't want to reinforce that inflexibility by getting people to sign up to your own ideas, if those ideas themselves are a reflection of the past. So it might be a case, Sagittarius, of you having power, but you deciding not to exercise this power, or at least exercising your power in a way that is, if you need to exercise your power, make sure you do it in a way that is constructive and does not reinforce the past. Because really it is a time when you should be looking at the future and new possibilities and just new ways of looking at things. Capricorn. The moon is still in Aquarius, so we had the full moon yesterday, and the moon is kind of still opposition the sun, and Capricorn, that's not necessarily such a big deal. I mean, it might be the case with moon still in Aquarius that you have to spend some time thinking about issues relating to to money, like yesterday. I mean, I think that if this full moon had any influence, then I think it could have had an influence in a financial sense. But again, I don't think it's necessarily huge. And maybe it's just a time to be looking at money, looking at how you handle money, and asking yourself, perhaps you've been doing things in a way that is just a little too traditional. And I'm not talking about how you invest money or you spend it, perhaps more about how you organize money, the kind of accounts that you use, whether or not you're using, I don't know, something traditional like a checkbook, or whether you're using more sort of online approaches to how money is transferred. So that might be something you're thinking about, very sort of quite down to earth. The minutiae of your financial approach. And when you've got Moon in Aquarius conjunct the North Node in Aquarius, that can be about technology. Aquarius is a sign connected with technology, and the Moon is making a trine to Mars, and so with the Moon trine Mars, Capricorn, that might be about reorganization. Making the effort to understand something and just have another look at how you've been getting things together, how you've been making sense of things, because there are times when you've got to consider change, when you've got to sort of get yourself up to date. That just might be a way of dealing with this full moon. You don't want to be behind the times. Although, being a Capricorn, you can be quite traditional. You have this traditional approach. And maybe sometimes you can be a little bit too traditional. And, this Moon trine Mars, it's not just Moon trine Mars. The Moon is separating from a sextile to Saturn and a trine to Mars. So Mars, Saturn, Moon are involved in this aspect, and they're involved in it in a very constructive way. And so I think that you can just make things much easier for yourself, and it shouldn't take too much effort. And at the same time, Capricorn, you're probably a little bit more definite than you were yesterday. There could be things that you're starting to notice, and you're starting to notice that your own energy levels are just beginning to rise a bit. Perhaps your energy levels haven't been as high as they usually are over the last couple of days. I mean, we've got full moon. That full moon, I think, for many of us has been quite exhausting. Even if we're not a Capricorn. Although Capricorn, I don't think this full moon for you is necessarily a huge event, but just could have been affecting everyone's energy levels regardless of their sign. But now you are finding that energy levels are increasing. You're increasingly feeling that there is something you want to do, something you want to push out, and if you're in a situation where there is resistance, where you don't like what someone is doing, you disapprove, or you feel that you're being frustrated, I think there's an increased chance now that you're going to do something about it, that you're going to feel that you have to assert yourself. And it might come from nowhere. Just suddenly you realize it's just not good enough. And you can feel the sort of the fire rising in you from nowhere. And Capricorn is, of course, not a fire sign, but we've all got all the four elements contained within us, and that hidden fire may be starting to manifest, and it might not take much to trigger it. Aquarius. The moon is in Aquarius, like yesterday, and the sun is still in Leo, so it's kind of still the full moon. The full moon, yes, the full moon was yesterday, but the full moon is still very much with us. With the moon, the sun and the moon still in opposite signs. And so what I said about the full moon yesterday for you, I suggested that it might be about relationships, how you get on with certain people, how you perceive certain people. And now that the moon is in late Aquarius, and it's moving away from the opposition of the sun, I think you have a better perspective. And one thing I said about the full moon is that the full moon can be about, the truth, our own individual truth. I mean, I know it's very difficult to isolate the truth unless it's something simple like 2 + 2 = 4. I mean, that is true, I assume. But in many cases, it's just something that's difficult to pin down. And we're talking about your truth, not anyone else's truth. And it's important that you respect that. With the moon in your sign, or with the North Node in your sign, you need to hold on to what you believe. But this full moon also shows you what other people are like. And that might be people who are very close to you. It might just be people in general. Aquarius can actually be quite a political sign. And I'm not an Aquarius. Obviously, I've got my South Node in Aquarius. This is supposedly something I should be moving away from. But there is a question: what do the people out there? What do they really believe? What does the electorate believe? It can sometimes be shocking. You think that you've got all the answers, and particularly if you're interested in politics, you think you know best. But does anyone really agree with you? Maybe they don't. And perhaps with this full moon, you get an idea about the public. The masses out there, and it could also be about particular individuals, people you know well, but you are starting to get an understanding, and it's good to have an understanding, and you're also getting an understanding of their fundamental strength. It's easy to underestimate them, but certain people are in a really good position. Maybe they're in a better position than you. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. So, if you are in a competitive situation, if it's something that's been sort of dragging on, you might suddenly become aware of another person's strengths. And if you become aware of another person's strength and you're in competition with them, then it's a time to change your strategy, to perhaps be more cautious and take the time to understand what's going on. Maybe it's a situation which is not going to last forever, but for the moment, there just may be certain people who are in a stronger position than you. But it could be that you can benefit from other people being in a stronger position than you. They're not necessarily enemies or rivals. You can actually use their strength. And I think this is something I said yesterday. You can sort of get lucky or be more fortunate through the interaction with certain people. So don't discount anyone, and certain people can really work for you, and that doesn't mean that you have to hide yourself. This is a time where you matter and your priorities matter, even if you're not in the strongest ever position. And the moon is making a trine to it's making a sextile to Saturn, and it's making a trine to Mars. So those two aspects are pretty useful. And with moon trine Mars, I think that you're able to make it clear who you are and what you want, and what you're prepared to put up with. And so it might be a time where you can you can explain yourself and explain your priorities, and even if you're not in the strongest of positions, I think that most people will listen to you and give you the respect you deserve. Pisces. Jupiter has been really close to the Sun. I mean, yesterday we had a Sun-Jupiter conjunction. So it was cazimi. That sounds good. I mean, astrologers are really, some astrologers think it's great for the Sun to be exactly conjunct a planet. Certainly, traditional astrology thinks it's great. It's somehow the planet is actually really strengthened by it. And as I keep saying, it might depend on the situation. Perhaps if you're doing a horary chart where you're asking questions, maybe when the Sun is 17 arc minutes from another planet, that is fortunate. But I think in natal astrology, I think there can be issues with the Sun being too close to Jupiter. And as far as you're concerned, it just might have felt that just some things were just rather too much to deal with, and this could have been undermining. You have to think about your boundaries, think about how much you can take. I mean, with a Sun-Jupiter conjunction, bearing in mind that Jupiter is your ruler, this could well have been exhausting, and so that might be a test of the Sun-Jupiter being cazimi conjunct Jupiter. How did you feel yesterday? I mean, if you had a really great day yesterday, if yesterday was really wonderful, you had a wonderful full moon, well, that will be an argument in favor of the cazimi, the exact cazimi conjunction actually being fortunate. If you just felt sort of exhausted and yesterday you weren't on great form, then that would suggest something different. And maybe it works differently for different people. But now that the Sun is moving away from Jupiter, I would argue that you're feeling a bit better today. That's what I suspect. That something that had been pressurizing you, perhaps even making you feel a bit under the weather, has been moving on, and you just feel better able to deal with things, and you're more in control. And if you want to make changes, you now have that opportunity. And if you want to start to organize things in such a way that your own interests are looked after, and your health, physical, psychological, spiritual, it's all looked after, then I think that that can happen. So I think for most Pisceans, it's going to be a better day today than yesterday. And additionally, Pisces, I think that you do have a certain amount of power. I think that if you want to be influential, you can be influential. So if you're trying to change someone's mind, there's a way. You can perhaps use your Piscean subtlety to create a situation where you do get your way, where you can demonstrate that perhaps your way is the best way. And if there's something that you're really obsessed about, something you really want, then yeah, I think there is a way of getting it. And if you want to be manipulative, you can be. I mean, Pisces does actually have a reputation for being quite a manipulative sign. But you're not necessarily doing it in an emotional way. It's just perhaps just the strength of your personality, because it's somewhat understated maybe, but if you feel you need to show your strength, Pisces, then I think you very much can. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to turn to the I Ching. So I ask the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 9, which is the taming power of the small. So this hexagram isn't particularly exciting, at least on the face of it. So when you've got the taming power of the small, it's really talking about limiting our activities, that we shouldn't be taking on too much. Something needs to be tamed. We need to restrict ourselves perhaps to things which are fairly simple and straightforward. And it's not a time to be carrying out sort of huge ventures. And if we go too far, there's always that urge for action. It can be quite an irresistible urge for action. We've got to keep moving, we've got to keep doing something, but in the process we might just end up getting absolutely nowhere. Now this hexagram does have 3 moving lines, so 3 moving lines is rather a lot, and so that might say something about what the day is like. So every time you've got a moving line, you've got the concept of change. Perhaps one situation moving into another situation. And so if you've got 3 moving lines, you might say that the day has a number of different stages, and we have to perhaps go through those stages, and each one of those stages might have a very different quality. Okay, it could be morning, late morning, afternoon, evening, whatever. So there are perhaps distinct moments and distinct time periods over the course of a day. And the 3rd line from the bottom moves. Now in the I Ching, the 3rd line is often problematic, and that is the case with this 3rd line. And the image that the I Ching gives is firstly of some kind of carriage. Sort of a carriage sort of moves forward. Someone is trying to keep the carriage moving. But the terrain on which the carriage is moving is not great, and something happens. I don't know, an axle breaks, a spoke breaks, and this situation is embarrassing because it doesn't just talk about a carriage, it talks about 2 people, a couple, male and female, husband and wife, and they just look at each other, and looking at each other with maybe contempt. Yeah, you idiot, look what you've done. There's concept of rolling of the eyes. Look what you've done. We should have just stopped, but we didn't, and look at the mess we're in. And so there could also be a feeling of embarrassment, just taking something too far. You should have stopped, but you went on, or someone went on. Maybe it's not you, maybe it's someone else who's rolling their eyes. I think it's the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching talks about rolling of the eyes. I think the implication is that it's the wife rolling her eyes. Maybe the husband wanted to move forward and look at the mess we're in. And so the concept here is not going too far, not necessarily because there's going to be immense damage, material damage. It just could be just embarrassing when it just doesn't work. We tried something and it just was hopeless, and it was almost doomed to failure. But then, things do move on. We have the 5th line moving, and the 5th line is an altogether more fortunate line. It is about doing the right thing. There are concepts of loyalty with the 5th line. Being loyal to the right people, being trustworthy. From our own part, from our angle, be as trustworthy as one can be, and additionally, look at the people around you. And there's talk of neighbours here, so the people you are involved with, every day. Maybe you often don't talk to them too much, but maybe you can, and you can just show yourself to be a safe pair of hands, because that's really what is being looked for with this hexagram, the taming power of the small. We're not looking for huge initiatives. We're not trying to cross the great water, as the I Ching might put it. We're just trying to, stabilize things and make sure everything is under control. Perhaps we can see the possibility of future advances, but, maybe not right now. And so we can demonstrate our trustworthiness, and perhaps that trustworthiness can be returned. So although the third line is problematic, it seems that by the fifth line, the situation can be resolved. But, maybe we don't even have to go through the third line if we don't take on too much, if we don't feel that we have to drive our carriage through a bog, break the wheels. We have a choice there, don't we? And then the top line moves. And, the top line, in some respects, is the end of the whole process. The taming power of the small is perhaps about a time of restraint and self-discipline. And with the top line, things do change. It starts to rain, and the rain in the I Ching does indicate that a time of inaction has come to an end. Things are starting to move, but we have to get it right. It certainly says that we can do something. We can perhaps start to move forward, but we don't want to move forward too quickly, because if we move forward too quickly, there could be problems. So we have to get it right, and it works both ways. If we do nothing, that is the wrong approach. If we do too much, that is also the wrong approach. We have to just do enough to stabilize the situation, and if we can do that, then we should be okay. Now we do have lines moving: third line, fifth line, sixth line moving, and so that takes us to a different hexagram. And the hexagram we are taken to is hexagram number 19, which is approach. So this hexagram kind of indicates the next stage. So in a previous hexagram, we were trying to make some progress, but we were blocked. It might not have been the right time. But with 19 at the end, there is an approach. We're trying to move forward with something, and it's quite a social hexagram. It's perhaps about approaching another person. It could say something about relationships. It could be about taking that first initiative, and it is the right thing to do. But again, with approach, we don't want to take things too far. The hexagram indicates that maybe in the end, this approach, although it might be the right thing to do, it might not have a fortunate end. And so how does one work that out? It might be a situation where we have to make an approach, where we have to realize that it's not going to last forever. It might be about having a temporary connection with another person. Short term might be the right thing to do. Perhaps you and another person have got work you can do together, but don't take it too far. Everything has a limit, and so you have to understand that limit. And if you understand that limit right from the beginning, it just makes things easier, because when the time comes, you'll be able to sort of ease out of the situation before things turn against you. And that's all I've got to say for today. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.